Hollywood. The place to rise has a huge name in the entertainment industry in more ways than one. Hollywood has produced a lot of films and shows that not only help produce a lot of joy for the viewers, but also made many of the crew and cast of these projects become big shots in the entertainment industry. Almost the animation. It really is wonderful to see how filmmakers and celebrities that the public love started out and see them grow tremendously from who they were and gain our respects over time. It also gets depressing when they either grow out to be a joke from the start, or to see them tumble down when we thought that they could be a revered figure with so many potential. The latter is what happened to an infamous filmmaker named Joshua Benjamin Frank. Josh Trank was born in Los Angeles, and in his early years had a strong investment in his surroundings of Hollywood. He had a father who was a documentary filmmaker, coincidentally. That's cool. He divorced Pamela Trank when Josh was 13 and got remarried to Judy Toll, which was a year before her death by melanoma, a type of skin cancer. When she was still around, Josh didn't feel comfortable with her at first, but had connected with her over time and had grown more appreciative of her, as she was the person who pushed him to be in the entertainment industry, thus kickstarted his future career. And with that, Josh Trank appeared in projects of smallish roles, such as making this short film, being involved with a show called The Kill Point, being a second unit director in The Lie, getting the same uncredited role, along with being an editor and co-producing on Big Fan, along with being an actor on that, plus an episode of Arrested Development.
Who are you supposed to be?
Oh, I'm the Thing from Fantastic Four.
You've been served.
Didn't know that, did you? I never watched Arrested Development. But the stuff that really matters the most and what I want to cover in this video is the 3 movies he's worked on: Chronicle, Fantastic Four 2015, or Fantastic as the logo stylized itself to be, and Capone. What an interesting trilogy of films. How did Josh become part of these projects, and how did they turn out? Well, let's start on the first major footprint of his, shall we? Chronicle is a 2012 superhero film that's the directorial debut of Josh Trank and also his first writing effort, sort of. See, Josh thought of the idea of this film all the way in high school and has spent the following years making ideas for it. He conceptualized it into a spec script with the help of a fresh new screenwriter named Jeremy Slater. He will be important for later, but right now we're not there. He moved on from the spec script, leading Josh to bump into Max Landis, who I don't think he particularly liked, but partnered up with him as he wanted someone to help get the project off the ground. I don't think he expected to make such advancements to the progress of the film, as behind his back, Max pitched the script to Fox producers, which they saw massive potential on and greenlit the script. This is what I mean by saying this is sort of his first writing efforts. It seems like Max was hugely involved with the writing process, while with him being labeled as both story and screenplay writer and Josh only getting story credits. Not to mention the changes made from the original script, such as 2 key moments with Steve and Andrew's dad. As a result, Josh didn't fully consider Chronicle to be his own original film because of Max being the backbone of Chronicle's production. This article by Polygon made it seem like Josh Trank was not at all ready to deal with Chronicle's popularity growing to the point where his feelings about it all made him punch a hole in his house wall 2 weeks after Chronicle release. Must have been really awful to witness all of that, as I believe he might have had imposter syndrome stuck with him, but that's just my 2 cents. Now, what about the movie itself? It's amazing. There's no other way to put it. It's a film that feels really unique to me and came in at a time where I really needed it. I know that sounds strange, but not only does this film stick out to me on a personal level, but also on an inspirational level for the stories I want to tell in the future. But that doesn't really matter right now. The whole tone and vibe of the film reminded me a lot of Joker 1, where so much of what goes on feels not only real, but uncomfortable even, especially around the end. You can't even consider this a superhero movie at this point, as it actually feels more art house more than anything. Yeah, an art house superhero movie. I never thought any form of it would ever happen, but this is the closest I could find. The whole gimmick of found footage works so well for the film's existence, as it's what would make it stand out to begin with. Found footage can be an easy device for me to be immediately invested, as the whole nature of it gives off this added realism that many other films have to achieve to get it correct. How they utilize the cameras in the film is so amazing. It tickles my brain when filmmakers use it outside of basic operations. Sam Raimi, my beloved. The camera itself showed from the very beginning that Andrew is an unusual person, but it being used as a tool for the story, how the film cheats the gimmick by using Andrew's telekinesis to give more cinematic shots than what found footage normally allows filmmakers to go with, and switching to other cameras in the current environment environment to get a different view is not something I see often in any other movie, and I adore it so much. Aside from that, this film is tragic. Like, I didn't make that joke in comparison for nothing. Andrew, much like Arthur Fleck, starts off by trying to survive their worlds as down on their luck people, but something triggers that leads to an unsalvageable path for them to fall under. There are differences to their journey, but what they both go through is so unnerving that helps by each film's direction and acting. Okay, I don't want to make this a Chronicle and Joker comparison segment, but Andrew is a very complex character, let's put it that way. The direction and acting is also what adds more to the already existing realism of the film, as the chemistry between Andrew, Matt, and Steve is so good. The beginning is very engaging because everything feels real. I know I say that a lot, but it's like that's the best way I can describe Chronicle as a whole. It feels very authentic, very real, very, for lack of a better word, not fake. Like, I don't know how else to describe it other than it feels real. And I was digging them hanging out with each other, and it feels very heart-wrenching as the film later progressed. It becomes a lot more uncomfortable, as I mentioned earlier, as Andrew becomes a lot more sinister over time. Okay, I don't want to reveal a lot of story beats because this film truly is something you should see for yourself. So I suppose I could make a full in-depth video in future one day. There's so much I want to delve into this film because what I'm saying right now isn't enough. I just sound like a crazy yapper that's just probably doesn't have a script with me. The amount of outtakes I had to do in this segment is crazy. Pretty realistic. The direction and acting is also what adds more to the All I can say for now is it is one of the most underrated movies I've ever seen, and honestly started to become one of my favorite films of all time. One of my favorite films ever. I love this film with all my heart, and in the future I'm gonna do a video talking about it more in depth, but I don't have time to say it in this video. I'm not sure how long this is gonna take. An excellent film like this makes it all the better when it's positively received by both critics and audiences and a box office hit. Having a budget of 50 million USD and receiving 126.6 million USD in the box office, giving Fox and the crew 111.6 million USD in profit. This made Josh Trank the youngest director to ever open #1 in the box office at age 27. What an incredible achievement, honestly. That does not sound easy, and definitely accidental in Josh's perspective if you read any articles about what his career as a filmmaker was like. I don't think he ever intended on doing that. A sequel was in development by Fox, with Max Landis returning to write it. However, not only was Josh Trank not invested in making one, nor the idea of one, but the script Max made was rejected by Fox as they didn't like the darker tone of it, despite Max claiming otherwise. During research for this segment, I found a script of the supposed sequel, but I'm not sure how legitimate the script is, and I don't want to do a whole bunch of Google searches. Yeah, I know, terrible look on a YouTuber not doing research, but like, I don't know, I'm just under the belief that this isn't true, no matter how much I would try to go into if it is legitimate or not. The idea of a Chronicle 2 was still in limbo, as the most recent hearings of it was in 2021, as it was supposedly going to be a female-centric story, but we've not heard anything else outside of that. Okay, realistically, this is where I would transition to the next film, but last two things I want to mention is that Max Landis was actually banned by Josh from being on set of the first film. For unknown reason, like, he never explicitly stated why he banned Max from being on set, especially since like this film was shot in 2011 and this was long before allegations of Max came out. Yeah, you can't say that's the reason why Josh did. He never specified why. All he did is that he said that he was banned on set and that's it. And also, while on the topic of those allegations, and because I want to mention this in the least jarring way possible, Josh himself spoke out during the release of Capone in an interview that he was sexual himself.
When I was much younger, around 5 or 6, this sexual abuse that I had dealt with when I was a little kid, that at that point in my life, when I was in therapy, I hadn't talked about out loud, but it was something that I had just sort of pushed down inside of me, and I was afraid to talk about it because I was afraid that it would make me feel I don't know, less of a man.
I'll send an interview where he expressed it in the description, but this is not fun to talk about. Let's just move on. With such a successful film from a fresh filmmaker, he ended up exploding in the eyes of Hollywood, being attached to work on an R-rated Venom movie from Sony, a film from a comic book series called Red Star, a standalone Boba Fett movie, and even a film adaptation of Shadow of the Colossus? Shadow of the Colossus, Josh Trank. Weird combination, but all of those projects he either turned down or dropped out of as he went on to be hired in the infamous 2015 Fantastic Four. Yeah, we're here now, the real juicy bit of this video that a lot of you might have been waiting for. There is a whole video by Bullets and Blockbusters that not only goes into the heavy detail of the original plans for the film, but also the crazy fiasco that was behind the scenes of the film, as this shit is notorious for being one of the most disastrous productions to ever come out in recent Hollywood history. Again, great video, you should check it out, and I feel like if I go into depth myself, I'd be stealing their thunder in research, and also I'd be saying it in a shittier way. But to summarize the essentials as much as I can, this film was a product of being made to retain the rights to making Fantastic Four movies. Think of how Sony had to scoop up the Amazing Spider-Man films just to keep the Spider-Man rights instead of actual motivation and passion. Josh brought on the guy from earlier, Jeremy Slater, as Josh himself didn't know the Fantastic Four nor the comics that well, aside from watching that TV show I never even heard of. Despite that decision, he didn't get inspired by the actual Fantastic Four comics. Josh didn't want to make much of a superhero movie and more of a body horror film, which explains why his hands are more apparent before the 1 year skip in the story. Slater wanted to make a more comic accurate story as opposed to what Josh wanted, which is a lot more realistic and grittier and getting away from a lot of the Fantastic Four stuff. Josh already had some trouble cooperating with Fox as he wanted to make the Storm family black, which Sue never became in the final film, but Franklin and Johnny did. Fox cut the budget, which prevented a lot of action scenes, particularly ones showing the marketing like the trailer, to not be shot. After Josh sent his cut of the film, Fox got cold feet about it despite hiring Josh to direct and approved the cut script before filming. And that's not mentioning all the smaller stuff that happened, like Miles and Josh almost getting into a fist fight, which is very ironic because Josh wanted to bring in Miles Taylor. Josh lashing out at Kate Mara for not being able to cast a Black Stu Storm, which Kate Mara regretted not standing up against. Josh Dogs trashing up a house rented for him. Fan backlash against Victor Von Doom being named Victor Domashev, and the studio having to change that post-production. Yeah, have you ever noticed why no one ever mentioned Victor Von Doom's name when they're in camera? I could go on, but now with all that out of the way, it's no surprise that the film ended up the way it did. If you ask me, this is a Sonic 06 situation where I feel more fascinated by its existence and how it became the way it is. Now, something I don't think a lot of people notice is how this is technically a loose adaptation of the Ultimate Fantastic Four run, because there was a lot of similarities between that run and this film. I highly doubt it was intentional on Josh's part, but I believe Simon Kinberg, the producer and tertiary writer in this film, did acknowledge the Ultimate's run of Fantastic Four's existence, and I researched what the similarities are. The team are a lot younger as they are teenagers as opposed to their 616 counterpart. Reed's dad doesn't sound like he appreciated Reed, even though he only appeared for like 1 minute in the film. How the team gets their powers is through making an attempt to travel a new dimension and something goes wrong, but the offense of that incident and what goes wrong is different. The process of them getting their powers presented in a horrifying way. Dr. Doom's metal-looking appearance is never him wearing a metallic armor suit, but by him being transformed into looking metallic. Not the same way, however, but it is different from their 616 counterpart. Okay, realistically speaking, I haven't read the Ultimate Fantastic Four comics. This video gave me all this knowledge, but I'd be interested if any of you guys know what this film and those comics have in common. On to the actual film itself, you can easily tell that the first half of the film had a lot of the Josh Trank aesthetic intact, but even then it's surprisingly not really that good. It's a really dull watch as these characters aren't investing whatsoever, and this feels like the definition of going by the numbers. I mean, it's a red flag when they wrote the Homer Simpson teacher. Yes, that is Dan Castellaneta playing that teacher. To always be against Reed and be mean to him for absolutely no reason.
Yeah. You're disqualified.
Wait, what?
This is a science fair, not a magic competition.
The only thing worth mentioning so far is this line from Johnny.
Is that Adolf? Long time.
That's crazy. But honestly, when we make it to Reed and the others doing their Planet Zero expedition behind the government's back, the film honestly shines for a bit. The body horror aspect of this film was done well enough to where I can say this is a good aspect of the film, and I genuinely think this is what would have made the film stick out so much compared to other superhero films, especially modern ones. The body horror stuff in this film all feels haunting and frightening with effective enough tension and visuals, as many part of this film is actually well directed and well acted as well. I would love to see more superhero films take this radically different experimental approach, as I want some variety here and there in my superhero films. You can tell so much with the superhero genre, and this is an experimental take that I would love to see more of. Something remotely similar. Too bad this is a brief portion of the film, as the second half becomes something entirely different. Yeah, this is the chunk of the film where many people believe the reshoots entirely took place in, and it really shows. So much of the film just does not connect with what was set up earlier, and that Josh Trank essence is just not here. Maybe except for that Dr. Doom hallway scene, which is another good aspect of the film, but aside from that scene just looking cool, it's mainly just the government hunting Reed down. The rest of the three, it's just, oh, these powers are a curse, we should get rid of them. Going like, no, we should embrace them, and Ben just following commands of the government. They hunt down Reed, they recruit Doom from Planet Zero, and he turns apeshit, and now they have to stop him destroying the world, which is very typical and not at all impressive. Speaking of which, I'm not gonna lie, unpopular opinion, the design of Dr. Doom in this film, this is not Dr. Doom, but if we were to imagine this character as its own, like no association with Doom whatsoever, I like this design. Really is creepy and really cool how the Ava suit that Victor Von Doom was wearing just fused with his body. That is some creepy ass shit. I like this design and the concept of it. It's just, why did you pair it with Dr. Doom? But yeah, the Fantastic Four just have to kill Doom, and they do. Pitifully so. Like, he goes out like a bit. It's like how Gerald died of Sonic 3. It's like, what the hell? The second half of the film is just meandering bullshit. Everyone says it's bad. You know it's bad, and it fascinates me so much how and why the film became like this. It's a cautionary tale of what happens when everyone doesn't cooperate in a production. It sucks a lot after seeing both Chronicle and Capone, where he wasn't restricting what he wanted to do, as I'd honestly love to see what his original cut for Fantastic Four would have been like. Okay, it's on a business perspective, I don't think Josh should have been hired for this film whatsoever. Like, those list of troubled production notes I mentioned earlier in the video was like massive red flags for him to not be hired, but I actually with Josh's vision for the film a lot, speaking as a viewer of superhero content, and I actually see potential in this film being good. It's just not there. Sadly, a director's cut is never going to happen, as not only did Josh state on record that he doesn't care for this film anymore, let alone the idea of a director's cut, but he also admitted that a lot of what he originally had in mind never came to fruition anyways. The film was a collapsed building of a failure, receiving horrible reviews from critics and audiences, as well as underperforming at the box office, receiving 167.9 million USD against a budget of 112 million USD. There were plans for a sequel despite the film's performance, as Josh Kimberg and Fox hoped to make one, but it never happened, which is sadly for the better. I would have at least checked it out, what it would have been like, but it is what it is. Matthew Fogg, Kick-Ass and Kingsman director, was interested in directing the sequel himself as an apology effort for the first film, and doing research, Tommy Wiseau of all people wished to direct the sequel as he admired the film. What the fuck? I'm not sure if anyone knew this, but Josh Trank actually has a Letterboxd account and has reviewed this film. When the film came out, he expressed disappointment in it, but came back later and said it was alright in his review on that site. He also brought up his disinterest in the Trank cut and hoped that the Ant-Man director Peyton Reed directs the next Fantastic Four film, which, one, yeah, that isn't the case. Two, I'm not sure if people would agree after he made Quantumania, but I mainly blame that film's failure to Jeff Loveness, the main writer of that film. Fuck you, Jeff. I wonder what Josh thinks of the Tim story duology and the upcoming First Steps that's part of the MCU. I remember there were plans for the cast to be added to more Fox Marvel films like Deadpool 2 when Tim Miller was still attached, and a fucking cinematic universe of their own, which I believe Bullets and Blockbusters cover in their Fantastic Four and Deadpool 2 video. I know Miles Teller said that he'd be willing to play Reed Richards again if that Fantastic Four film script is good.
Say that again?
And that Toby Kebbell only wants to play Dr. Doom again if he was in the MCU.
I guess you'd come back if it was part of Marvel though, eh? That wouldn't take too much convincing, right?
Yeah, if they lend him out like a footballer, you know what I mean?
They do it with Spider-Man.
They do it with Spider-Man. Iron Man turns up in Spider-Man, you know what I mean?
Why not?
You had a fucking eager spot waiting for Dr. Doom instead of Robert Downey Jr., Kevin. Also, as a result of this film, Josh Trank hadn't really done anything after it, as I don't think anyone wanted to bring him along to make any films. He mentioned in an article that when Chronicle came out, he was getting a lot of calls and emails from like essentially Hollywood celebrities and studios. But after Fantastic Four, his inbox just ended up being dead silent, which it's just very sad. I would have hung myself at that point. This should have obviously been the end for Josh's career, right? You're the joke of the industry. No one wants you and everyone laughs at you, along with Fox. So you should give up, right? Well, Josh wasn't ready to step down, as he had been cooking something else starting a year after. Surprisingly, after a year from Fantastic Four, it was announced that Tom Hardy would play as Al Capone in Josh Trank's upcoming film Fonso. Josh would be the sole writer, director, and editor for the project, and filming was expected to be in 2017 until Tom Hardy got hooked into doing Venom instead. Thankfully, in 2018, Hardy did announce Fonso to be his next project, and filming began on March 19th of that year and later ended in May 15th. Okay, I want to break away from the analytical talk because when doing research on the making of this film, so much of what I found is basically Josh stating that this film is a personal project to him, and how this is what he's capable of when he has full creative freedom, and this film is just like him for real, for real. It's really funny how Josh's career right now is going from a popular entertainment movie to what's pretty much an art house film, as Josh himself described Capone to be. With this in mind, it makes sense why Capone wasn't marketed this much, as art house films don't usually get promoted as much as big blockbuster films unless your film is distributed by A24. But I don't want to claim that's entirely the reason for you never knowing about this film's existence. Originally, this film was meant to come out in theaters, but was released at an unfortunate time, which is at the time of COVID, where movies were suffering in financial performance because literally no one could go outside, Capone had to be released on video on demand as a result. Oh, I forgot to say, Fonso got changed to Capone as the film's title to bring it a more marketable name, which Josh himself did say helped bring more people to watch this film because a lot of people know who Al Capone is. But he also did state that the film being called Capone would like mislead people into thinking that this was about his gangster life instead of his life when he has Alzheimer's.
The original title of the film was Fonso. The name changed to Capone for marketing purposes that at first I had a really hard time accepting. It was a great trade-off because I ended up being able to get my final cut, which is what I wanted. But my feeling about the movie is that, you know, if you call it Capone, it's going to lead to a false expectation. A lot of people are watching this movie that might not have watched this movie if it was called Fonso. And for that reason, you've got people who are giving a more uncommercial artistic film a chance.
Also, trying to find behind the scenes footage for this film is practically non-existent, as it made picking background footage for this segment very tricky. Do you know the length I've gone to get footage of the film? Actually, I don't want to speak of it. My possible FBI stalker will hunt me if I do so. Now, with all this talk of Capone being Josh's passion project, after seeing the movie myself, it honestly feels like a concerning cry for help for Josh. A lot of the narrative of the making of this film being, oh, it's just like Josh for real, just makes me think that this film is resembling Josh being a mental wreck as his worldview deprecates. I'm not sure what to think of this film in general, because it's a film that just wanders to do its own thing, like Al himself in it. Something to point out about this film is that it's not aiming to be a biopic, or rather use Al Capone as a way to express what I assume is not wanting to be the identity you've made yourself as. This is like two films Josh tried to use something to describe something that isn't really truthful to what he's basing off from, which, you know what, I respect that decision of telling stories, I'm not gonna lie. It might be stupid, but I feel like what the film is trying to express just went over my head, and I couldn't really see what Josh wanted to say. This might just be me gaslighting myself into thinking the film isn't bad, but rather I just don't understand it. But I'm open for clarification to what this film is trying to say. What I can say is that Josh is definitely correct in saying that this is his film, as I could easily point out the Josh Trank aesthetic in this film, like how he wants his scenes to be shot. Which, by the way, I like the cinematography in this film. Tom Hardy does a great performance as Capone, as did everyone else in their role. EOP makes a pretty amazing soundtrack. Oh, by the way, that's the same guy who made this masterpiece of a track in Josh's previous film that I played in that segment. Josh himself played a role in the film. Oh, look at him, he's fashionable. But what sets this film back for me is how it feels like it has no directions, despite all the claims of this being a film that Josh had a vision on. I can't even summarize the film's event because it will more so sound like I'm listing the shit that happens instead of saying out a 3-act structure. Not helped by the fact that this film's pacing is slow, it's not going to be an easy watch for the casual audiences, which makes sense as an art house film is meant to be experimental and not something for a casual person like my parents. But I won't blame people if they say that this felt like a huge waste of time, to be honest. The most interesting part of the film for me is Capone's life flashing back to his gangster life, and actually, hear me out on this. All of Chronicle, the body horror stuff in Fantastic Four, and this scene is telling me one thing. Josh Trank could make an amazing horror film, and I would die happy if that happens. I don't want to say I hate this film, but rather, I don't understand it, so I'm just left a bit confused. Like, I feel like if I would get this film, I would enjoy it a lot more. I would go like, oh my god, I finally get it. Hopefully others can comprehend it better than me, as, like, I don't know how I could decipher this film. I'm stupid. As Capone released, critics were mixed on the film, while the audiences didn't particularly like it, which I could definitely understand, but I personally just found it okay. Now, the box office earnings of Capone was really annoying to find, as while Wikipedia states it made 160,000 USD, that's only from international releases, as those areas did get Capone in theaters. I did look up the home market earnings, which is around 2 million USD, which, by the way, home market earnings are basically the money the film gets from like DVDs, Blu-rays, digital platforms. But apparently home market earnings don't count as box office results, so the domestic earnings are non-existent. Even then, wouldn't have gotten its money back on a budget of 20.6 million USD, which showed that COVID season was horrible for films. I feel like Capone had the most pitiful legacy out of the Josh Trank trilogy, as unlike Chronicle, which resonated with many like me, and Fantastic being fun to dunk on, I never hear anyone casually mention this film, as it's relatively obscure, especially in Josh's filmography. Honestly, I didn't expect closing off this segment of the video to be this shallow. Wow, I really have nothing else to say. Damn. So, where is he today? As of making this video, the most recent hearing of what Josh is up to was 2 days after Capone's release, as he, along with Tom Hardy, had been developing a limited series about the CIA. Other than that, we've heard nothing else from Josh, as he deleted all of his social media except for Letterboxd. Speaking of his deleted social media, he reportedly yelled at a lot of his trolls when he still had his platform, and not gonna lie, justifiable crash out. Except for this post, this just feels very egotistical. We never heard any more news about the CIA show, and the Google News tab keeps telling me jack shit are in Fantastic Four. Also, it was very funny seeing footage of Fantastic and Deadpool Wolverine's credits. While on the topic, it seemed like Josh has internalized everything about the film's production, as a lot of interviews have shown that he's grown a lot from that experience.
It's so much easier to just be honest. If you're honest, you don't have to remember what the story is that you're trying to portray to other people. That creates more anxiety than anything. If you're just like keeping up appearances and keeping up an image and walking into things and being like, oh yeah, no, everything is absolutely perfect, and then that one's perfect, and I love all these people, and it's just like, it's okay if you didn't love all those people. You don't have to disrespect any of those people, but you know, sometimes things just don't work out, and it's on you to sort of like just continually work on your own self-awareness and know what works best for you and who are the best people for you to work with. And I think that goes into any line of work.
Josh as a person and a filmmaker has stood out for me in recent times getting older, as he's one of the most unique figures in Hollywood for a multitude of reasons. How could I not cover the guy who made a film that became one of my favorite films of all time, and then goes on to be wrapped up in the making of what's essentially Hollywood's equivalent of Sonic 06. Josh may seem like someone who's odd to work with, and a lot of his decisions during the production of Fantastic is very questionable. Some I really don't want to defend for. But to me, he's a very human filmmaker among the ones I've heard of, and I hope he's doing okay currently, which he seems to be basing off his Letterboxd. I do hope he gets to make another project, to be honest, as I would love to see what else he can come up with without any sort of interference. So to take away from this video, Chronicle is one of the most underrated movies I've ever seen. I will unironically rewatch Fantastic because of how weirdly fascinating its existence is to me. Capone exists, and Josh is a very unique man to me who I would like to see more of his work. Also, if any sort of Josh Trank mention makes it into First Steps, like a cameo he hoped to have, I will annoy people about it for a few days. Anyways, go shower, you smell.